Council of East Africa sitting in Entebbe has found that a big number of graduates are not for the job market, and this cuts across most universities in the East African region. The Initiative for Social and Economic Rights has also conducted a study revealing that a situation that educationists have blamed on teachers, whom they say have not done enough to prepare learners for higher education. This ideally points to the case of garbage in, garbage out. Well, this morning we ask who is responsible for the situation and what can be done to reverse this trend. And joining me this morning is a couple of guests, three of them. One is Mr. Professor Eli Katunkuka, who is the Chairman, National Council for Higher Education, also Vice Chancellor, Kyambogo University. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Other one is Mr. Musa Mugoya, Program Officer, Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. Thank you for you conducted a search recently. You had
actually it was mainly discussing conducting issues to do with the PPP program, private partnership, in the implementation of universal secondary education.
We are going to get into that in a bit. And of course, the third guest is Mr. Ben Chirere, who is a teacher. Now, we have two individuals here. One has been blaming the other, and the other has been blaming the other. And then in the middle is one that has conducted a research. He has some findings that he's going to share with us. Well, let me start with the Chairman, National Council for Higher Education, who is also the VC Kyambogo University. The quality of education. First of all, what do you make of the quality of the institution of higher learning in this country?
When you talk of the quality of higher learning in this country, you have many institutions you're thinking of.
Yes.
You have universities, you have those colleges. So it's a big body of institutions you're talking about. I think I can talk about universities. When you talk about universities, we have seen a mushrooming of universities in this country. We now have about, you can call them 52 universities.
Yeah.
About 9 public and about 43 private. And all these are trying to provide higher education because there is high demand for higher education. The statistics we have is that about 96,000 students sat A-level last year, and about 63,000 qualified to join universities. But out of those, I think the public universities will accommodate about 30,000, and then the rest will go to private institutions. So when we talk about the quality of higher education, and the National Council for Higher Education is responsible for regulating the quality of higher education. But there are many elements to talk about quality, the products you get out of these institutions. It's true we have received those reports about the preparedness of our graduates for the job market, which points to the quality of the products we give to the stakeholders outside. So there are many elements to the quality of education. One is the environment in which students are taught. I'm talking about the teaching space in universities, the quality of the infrastructure, and the teaching environment, which in my view has been declining over the years. When we talk about many of these private universities, they are operating in environments that are not conducive for good learning and teaching. Then you can talk about the staffing levels. The universities across board are grossly understaffed. The number of teachers, the quality of teachers, the number of professors is minimal. And also, because of the large numbers of students in these institutions, the institution like Kyambogo now we have about 33,000 students on campus. So the level of interaction between the instructors, call them lecturers if you want, and the students has gone down. So there's no doubt that the quality of or the intensity of teaching will go down. Another thing you have is about the level of funding. Universities have continually received less and less money, especially from government. And even these private institutions which are mushrooming, most of them are coming up to make money. They're like business entities, but many of them are failing. And I think the National Council for Higher Education should put in place a mechanism of strengthening their regulatory mechanism, their standards, and those institutions that do not meet those standards should be closed. So I think when you add all those, but of late the government, I think, has been coming in and trying to improve the facilities in the universities, especially public universities, especially related to the HEST project. HEST stands for Higher Education, Science and Technology Project. So many institutions have received infrastructure. But in a situation where you have less staff, where the facilities are minimal, where the funding is minimal, and another element is the quality of the learners. We have a problem of students in universities. We have students who want to get qualifications without doing anything. This is a trend.
Right there. What do you make of the products that you're receiving at the university level from lower levels?
You could say that really, I think the same problems go down to lower levels. We have heard of fewer teachers in primary, fewer teachers in secondary schools. The environment for teaching is minimal. So the level of teaching and engagement of students at lower levels is also very minimal. So the students we get in universities, much as they may get 2 principals to gain into university, I think the qualities of these students are also low. So we struggle to make good of these students who are ill-prepared for university education. Even the attitude to learn, the will to learn, many of them don't want to learn. You will never get students going on strike for a lecturer dodging them. When a lecturer dodges them, they go on holiday. So the attitude of the students is also a big problem, right from secondary school to colleges to universities. So we have a problem of the learners as well.
You are responsible for this level that is that the VC here is pointing out, that the quality of what they are receiving is not the quality that they expect to receive. You are the one that provides that quality. You're the ones that push this quality to them. What's your take on this?
Thank you so much. I think I first of all appreciate the fact that the professor has not mentioned so much in terms of the quality they receive. Most of the problems seem to be at university level. You have heard him mention issues of understaffing, issues of strikes and the rest. But I think what I would mention here is that there is a mechanism of how one enters into university. There is a set standard. It's not a matter of teaching everyone and then by the end of the day you push to university. There is a mechanism of how they can shift and say, I think you qualify to be in university and you don't qualify to be in university. Meaning that those we think, we assume are not capable of making it at university, they are left out. And that's why he mentioned the issue of 2 principal passes. The moment you have 2 principal passes, you qualify to enter university. And I think the issue of 2 principal passes for a degree and 1 principal pass for a certificate or a diploma, these are set by National Council for Higher Education. They have understood that by the time you make it to have 2 principal passes, it's possible to be taught in a university. Of course, that's one of the mechanisms of entering university. The more to the upgrader, that's after diploma, and then the aptitude and the rest. But I think the basic level, basic education, that's the primary, pre-primary, secondary schools, those are the people that prepare for universities. There is a mechanism too of how we think who qualify to go to university. There are the issue of examinations now. the curriculum is set, and mostly in basic education, they are especially like primary, the reading and writing.
The bar has been set. It's very
Yes.
clear. You get 2 principal passes, you can go to university,
Correct.
you get 1 for a certificate. Primary education, the bar has been set. Secondary education, the bar has been set.
Yeah.
So where is the problem? Where is all this, let's call it garbage, coming from? Because if the bar is set on how high one should jump to go from one level to the other, then the expectation would be that at least we are getting people that are ready to be taught, have the attitude to be taught, have what is necessary for them to learn.
I think everybody is ready to be taught, but possibly what happens at any level is what determines what eventually you come out with. Like if for example, you have issues of a student lecture ratio, the lecturers are very few, and you are teaching hundreds of students. You even get attempted to getting a microphone to speak to them. I think the teacher interaction, the one-to-one interaction, you are more teaching everyone but not teaching a student. So the individual differences and that individual assistance to the student gets limited. And by the end of the day, everybody gets on the bandwagon, he waits for a semester to end, walks out of university, to a level that even people are hiring people to do them coursework. People are being hired to do research. So by the time such a kind of person comes out to university, when he faces the real world, to get there and then say, now there's a problem here, get something done. And this person was helped to do coursework, was helped to do research, everything was commercialized and hired. By the time he comes out of university, he's actually half-baked.
We can't say government to Yambe, Mr. Mugoya. According to the research that you have done, a couple of them, who is to blame here? Is it the learners? Is it the university? Is it the system? Or no, let's not blame the government this time around, because we are giving them, the quality that we are giving them is what they have to deal with.
No, but I think the responsibility of the live education rests on government, not private individuals.
Okay.
Yes, as an individual, a private person, you come in just to supplement.
So where is the problem? Is it universities? Is it lecturers? Is it the learners themselves?
I think let us begin from here. One, if you push, and I think the professor was right, if you push the biggest burden onto university, is to get the issue actually wrong. Because for anything, foundation is very key. And I think the biggest challenge is planning. And planning, you can only plan when you have reliable data. Actually, as of now, I can tell you, I think maybe they resolved it recently. Ministry of Education doesn't have reliable data on the total number of education institutions in this country. Now, if you don't even know just the total number of education institutions, or that means even you're not aware of the total number of learners that you have or you're supposed to plan for. And that goes into issues to do with because the moment you have the planning wrong, it means even resource allocation will not be correct, even human resource recruitment will not be correct, because you don't know how much you need.
Okay.
Now,
yes.
Also, just to add, and as a result of the planning, it means even the infrastructure or the human resources, as I've said, that will come will not be adequate. Let me just give you a few examples. And it appears that we always implement before we plan. Let me give you the example of making sciences compulsory.
Yeah.
Government made sciences compulsory, but are you aware that there is a big staffing gap of science teachers across the country? Recently, we are doing some research right now on the status of implementation of SDG 4. We were in a Kapiripiti district. The entire district has 2 secondary schools, and every school has only 1 science teacher. You understand? Now, how do you expect such a school to deliver? In some instances, you find that such a school will hire some people like who completed the senior 6 and did a bit well to come in and do what? And teach. Now, also, it is not only the issue of what of staffing, but also the issue of infrastructure, laboratories. As I've told you, they made sciences compulsory without first planning and putting things in place. Now, you find a school without laboratories. There are those ones actually where government has established laboratories, but they don't have teachers. Where they have, you find that actually where they don't have teachers, but where there are teachers, sometimes there are no laboratories. Now, a student there who would have passed by luck is not well exposed on issues to do with the sciences and practicals. Some of them do practicals, like maybe a day to exams. They rely on pamphlets to cram. Now, once that person passes by luck and goes to university, and you're giving him to Professor Katunguka to teach that person sciences, he's not well exposed. He reach university and is seeing these equipments for the first time. How do you expect him to be able to get actually better education at the university level with a weak foundation? The other thing, if you allow me, which I want to just conclude with about the issue of reading culture. Again, it goes back to the issue of infrastructure and facilities in place. In any typical school in this country, I will tell you, you will find that there are no laboratories, so there are no libraries. Now, where there are libraries, you will find that where actually those schools have been lucky and have received some books from Ministry of Education, the books are kept in the store. Now, the students do not go there to read. You don't build a reading culture at university. You build a reading culture from primary to secondary. And because I can imagine for you, because reading and doing work, which if now to touch the discussion into the whole thing of the program, for you right now, I can't imagine the amount of reading you do to be able to deliver here. You don't only read things to do with the journalism and all that. Now you're into education, you have to read into about the health sector, read issues to do with the medicine and all that. Now that means that culture would have been created and well established at primary and secondary, such that when someone now goes to university, is just what? Is just saying. I have one issue, but I'll come back.
Okay. If you're just joining us this morning and you're wondering what we are mumbling and talking about this morning, we're talking about education in the country. Recently, we were talking about the new curriculum that has been rolled out for O level. It's and you know there has been that continuous conversation on curriculums in Uganda, and you know the wrong subjects being taught. Now he is pointing out very, very important issues here. How we implement before we plan, and we have a whole district that has only 2 science teachers, but we're expecting products from that district. Now, before I get to you, Professor, because I want to get a teacher's perspective on this, the curriculum has been a point of discussion, of contention for quite some time. There's a new curriculum now. What do you take of the curricula of learners at all levels as per se today? Because I'm going to fall to VC a little bit later, because this gentleman has pointed out a very clear, a very important issue here, where we have to begin at a certain level going up. The curriculum has started halfway instead of us beginning from bottom going up. But what do you make of the curricula of learners today?
Yes, thank you. I think about the curriculum today, I always look at education, the quality of education by definition, possibly to mean fitness for purpose. If to say a certain level of education, or to say education is quality, I think it means it is meeting the purpose for which it is designed. The
curricula we have today,
yes,
is it designed for the learners to pass, or to learn, to be educated, or to simply just go through the system?
Yes, I think the problem of the curriculum today is traced from our history, where the kind of education we have is basically for service. It is less of innovation. We want people to get educated, get degrees, then get out of universities, and then get jobs.
Okay.
Yes, and because of that, a person will read for that course he thinks is employable. And so the curriculum we have from, of course, the primary section curriculum with a number of subjects, and then targeting PLOE, then after PLOE you get your best if you get 4 in 4, and then bring in the commercialization of the private school and then the government schools. By the end of the day, the whole thing is targeting the passing, the 4 in 4.
Okay.
But when you look at the intention for which this curriculum is designed, is basically getting there to mean almost examination oriented. Okay. Because the practicals at primary school don't exist at examination level. They can exist during the teaching and learning, but when it comes to PLOE, that they are setting a practical kind of activity being done as part of the examination part, that practical aspect in primary school doesn't exist.
So as a teacher, would you say there is need for a complete overhaul of the curriculum?
That's what would be, and especially the overhaul should be evidence-based, where you have gone to the employer part, the industry, you have gone to the universities, you have actually consulted every stakeholder, and we see because you have seen people getting out of university, getting a job, and somebody needs to be retooled. It's like as if he didn't go to school. He needs to be retaught again in order to fit the job for which he's being employed.
Most employers have complained about the attitude of workers these days, and I think when we consult, or when we do enough consultation, I think you'll need to have an attitude class from primary, because
it's the general attitude of our people, especially young people. They don't want to work.
Professor, so there is need for a remodel of the curriculum, an overhaul.
The curriculum may be remodeled, yes, and I think there has been a revision of the secondary curriculum.
Yes.
And I think the focus now is to introduce practical-oriented courses.
Right there.
Oriented courses.
I'm going to stop you just a minute, Professor. Practical.
Yes.
Oriented.
Yes.
Classes.
Yes.
The new curriculum, O-level, the teachers are being asked to teach from morning to 2:30 p.m. As a teacher, are you ready for that practical orientation? Because once it is implemented, you'll have to teach to 2:30.
Yes.
Then after that, are you ready for that period from 2:30 onwards?
Of course, that after 2:30, what happened there should actually be the actual life experience, relating what you have learned in theory to actually what should be.
Are the schools ready for that? Do you have...
The school don't seem prepared, because these things most teachers, I'm sure, are not even aware that arrangement is coming soon.
Let me get to the VC here. So this is the man responsible for
people are not aware that there is an arrangement of that kind.
No, I'm not responding.
You're part of higher learning.
Yes, but when you talk about the curriculum may not have a big problem.
Yes.
Now this has been remodeled or revised, which is very good. Focus more on practical orientation. And this is to give our people hand skills to be able to use their hands, to do the farming, to do the agriculture, to do the home economic things, so that at the end of the day, they can use these skills to make a living. And I think what is coming out of this is that eventually, people should not look at going to the university as the only source of making a livelihood. And this is why the government is focusing more on vocational education and vocational institutions. So that people now, and I think the culture is coming on, to know that my child can make a living if they go to vocational training institutions first. Get skills to use their hands. Learn plumbing, learn electrical installations, building and construction, and then later on they can go to university. The thinking that the only way a child can survive and make a living is through university is changing, because it all depends on what the student does at the university. If you do a course that's not going to add value to your life, or that's not going to promote you, you remain the same. So I think the curriculum may change good, and I think curricula have been changing, and universities will review our curricula every 5 years. But he has highlighted a fundamental problem: the staffing in these schools and the infrastructure. You may have a curriculum, but there are many areas or studies where there are no teachers. So what happens?
So now let's get to the real gist of this conversation. How do we improve? What do we have to do to get better? Because now we know where the gaps are. We know where the problems are. We know that, yes, the curriculum might have its faults, might have its problems, but remodeling it is not going to is not going to improve the quality of learners that we have in the country. Yes, I'm going to get to the professor when it comes to universities and how they are dealing with all the issues that they have, underfunding and all that. But from your research, what do we do now going forward to improve on this?
I think one, as I've said, I want really to emphasize the issue of planning. It is very important. Before you commence on implementing any program, make sure that you have done effective planning and actually put in place all the necessary resources for you to achieve what you want. Because I'll give you an example. Recently, when the exams came back for UCE, I was reading through and I found that there is a school, I think in Western Uganda, where it is a city school, a government school, which was one of the last schools, the worst performing schools in the country. But I said, this is a government school. Maybe the teachers are on government payroll. Why would they perform poorly like this? Now it raises the issue of accountability. People who are in these positions should be held accountable for the product they are putting out. The other thing is the issue of, I think we need to take a very strong decision, because you realize that with the liberalization, education now is also something like you can go in the market and
it's a business.
It's a business.
Yes.
And for business, and all of us who have started business, you realize that when you're starting business, you want to cut at least the costs.
You have to cut costs.
Yes.
Now, and even when you're making money, when the school has taken off, you have to maximize profits.
Yes. Now, the challenge with that, with education, it means someone will have to compromise on the sort of staffing and the resources is putting in to maximize what?
And in that way, they are compromising the quality
of
the learners.
Which will go out.
Wow.
The other thing is the issue of the whole thing of supervision and the strict implementation. Even you have the curriculum in place, let us just go with the current one at least we have.
Yes.
At least they say they are supposed to teach from 8 to 5?
Yes.
Yes.
8 to 5.
But how many in Kampala here you always move on the street in the morning?
Holiday work,
yes. At what time
the kids are up at 6:36 a.m. to go to school. 5 a.m. They are going back home at 7, 8 p.m.
Yes, therefore the whole thing of yes, you can have
there's not enough monitoring.
There's not enough monitoring and inspection of these schools.
Okay.
The last thing which I want to talk about is the commitment in terms of funding. As I've said, education, because you see, for you to achieve development in a country, human resources is very key.
Yeah.
Whether you want to have quality health care, whether you want to build whether you want to industrialize, as the president is always talking, human resource is extremely key, and that calls for adequate funding, commitment to fund. Because I'll give just one simple example about funding for UPE. During that, the government allocated 10,000 shillings for every pupil in a primary school per year. But that money, I was reading the Auditor General's Value for Money report of 2016, and the Auditor General was indicating that actually some schools are getting less than 6,000 per year.
10,000 Ghana shillings is already little, and then some schools are already getting less than that.
Less than that. This week, schools like in Mamudat, Nakapitipirit, 6,000.
Let's as we wrap up this conversation, I'll get one more comment from you. What do you think we need to work on to improve?
I think, like my colleagues have mentioned, the planning.
Yes.
If we strengthen the foundation, of course we shall have little complaints from universities. Because basically what's happening today, everybody's learning for strategic level kind of education, ending up in universities, and yet leading many people at operations, where after P7 there can be added value and you do something. Okay. After senior 4 and after. So if we make every level very useful, I'm sure the pressure we're even creating at university level can be at least limited. Okay. But because everyone wants to be in university for the sake of kind of passing and then yes, and then by the end of the day gets a job, that is strategic level. But operations now is what is key and very important. Therefore, we need to strengthen the systems down before we even talk of university, because we can live without university.
If you may both allow me, of course, we will have the most senior person on this table have the last say, and that is the professor. Professor, there are two things here. A child will join primary school at, let's say, about 5, 6. Is that okay? Is that right? 6 years old, primary school.
That is for
P1.
P1.
P1. So let's say they join at 6 years.
And that's the correct age.
Plus 7 years. That's primary.
Yes, primary.
Plus another 6 for secondary. By the time they're getting into university, they are 19.
Yes.
Then let's say at least 3 years at university. So the output is at 22 years. This is the least, at least the least expected at university. Is this too old? Should we squeeze the numbers a little bit and have more young people that are still energetic and enthusiastic about learning?
Sounds young enough.
I think
this age is okay.
That age is okay.
So
that age is okay.
What should we do? Now they have told you what needs to be done. Planning. At your level, what do you think needs to be done?
First of all, that age is okay for students joining university at 19.
Yes.
But we find they are less prepared for university life and university education at 19.
Yes.
They're still small. And I think our children these days, I don't want to say that they mature late, but at 19, many of them are still
So we should add more years down here so that by the time they get to university, maybe they're 22 and ready?
But that's not the problem. I think what we need to do is to have a comprehensive conversation as a country about the type of education we want in this country.
Right there.
What type of education? The national planners, educationists, everybody in the education sector. Also that you have universities, you have the ministry, you have finance, you have... because you cannot point a finger at a single problem. It is comprehensive. You have a problem of funding, you have a problem of staff across board, secondary schools, universities, you have a problem of infrastructure, spaces for teaching, you have a situation where these students are now too many. You sit in a class of 200, the class can accommodate 50. How will students learn? So there is a bigger problem we need to discuss as a country and see where do we want to go. I can tell you that funding for universities has continually gone down because we are told that the budget for university funding is fixed. So if you have 6 universities, you share that budget. If you become 12, the budget remains the same. So the level of funding is going further down. How do you run a university when you don't have enough staff? How?
Okay.
How do you run a university when you don't have the infrastructure for teaching? When you don't have laboratories? When you don't have the bandwidth? These days we don't talk about books in libraries because students can use their gadgets and access information. So there is a need to have a comprehensive discussion about what type of education does this country need and how do we get there.
Thank you very much, Professor. I hate to cut you short because this is a very important discussion, but I will definitely get more time to probably tackle another area on how to improve education in this country so that we don't just produce people who just want to go through the system and then end up having no jobs. I think that is responsible for the biggest number of people with no jobs in this country. Should we have an attitude class? That is a question I'll ask you the next time you guys come around. Thank you very much for joining us. Professor Eli Katunkukwa, the Chairman, National Council for Higher Education, also VC Chambogo University. Mr. Musa Mugoya, Program Officer, Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. I like your research. You're reading a lot with your research, I can tell, because I saw the professor nodding all throughout the conversation, which is very good. I think you need to sit down and have one cup of tea. Thank you very much, Mr. Ben Chirere, who is a teacher, for joining us today for our Take Note conversation. In case you want to join in, you can do that as well. The hashtag is morning@NTV across all social media platforms. Morning at NTV continues right after this.
You talk about licensed companies, yet the general feeling, the way it appears in public, is that it's like an unregulated industry. Is this industry regulated? If so, how? By who?
Okay. Yes, the industry is regulated, strictly regulated by the